Everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. That's what Kody Brown whispered to himself. The only sound more than the thud 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 of his own heart. The envelope in his hands seemed to weigh more than it should, like it held not only paper and ink, but the burden of years of secrets, of lies, of unspoken betrayals. He stood there, holding it at arm's length, looking down at the stark black and white image of the court crest. Summons. The word itself seemed to reverberate through the empty room, off the walls, into his very soul, amplifying the tension that had been quietly gathering in his life for decades. Kody's thoughts were a jumble. A court case against him? The mere idea was enough to make his chest constrict. He always felt that his family, for all their unorthodox living, stood on a solid base of faith, knowledge, and devotion. But the letter in his hand was poised to tear all of that apart. This wasn't forms and paperwork. It was an invasion of the Brown family's very heart. It was as though someone had opened the lock to the meticulously crafted image they had presented to the world, and judged it was time to reveal the reality behind the smile and pretense perfection. He settled into the cracked leather armchair in his sitting room. The envelope still wrapped tightly. The gentle whir of the ceiling fan above took no effect on calming the tempest raging in his head. The Browns had lived for years under the microscope. Cameras, interviews, and the unrelenting watchful eye of the public had required them to project happiness, harmony, and togetherness. To the world, they presented themselves as the perfect polygamous family on television. Meals gathered around a huge table, vacations filled with everyone laughing, kids running wild through their large estate. But the glossy version of their existence had always been precisely that, a version, deliberately managed and pruned, where the flaws were concealed behind private doors. And now, it appeared, someone had deemed that private fractures could no longer be kept hidden. Kody's hands shook as he opened the envelope, slowly extracting the official papers. The legal jargon leaped out at him in stark, taunting letters. Allegations, accusations, disputes, concealed assets, mismanagement, secrets. The words coalesced into a crushing weight, every one a knife directed point-blank at the core of the family he had worked years to defend. Memories came rushing back, hushed, late-night fights that had been quelled before the kids heard, whispered words suggesting lack of trust, and the small but nagging uncertainties that had left a lingering presence in his mind over the years. He had suppressed them at the time, assuring himself that love and loyalty would always get the better of him. But now, all by himself with the subpoena in his hands, those doubts appeared to insist upon a hearing. They shouted at him. Perhaps the cracks were always wider than he had dared to perceive. He considered his wives, each one with her own individuality, her own drive, her own connection with him. They had been by his side for all of it. The battles, the press attention, the difficulties of polygamy in a world that so easily condemned them. But what if they were hiding things? What if the faith he had put in them, and they in him, was misplaced? It was a thought that sickened him, yet one that could not be shaken. Kody relaxed back into the chair, eyes shut for a second. He could have sworn he heard the resonance of family dinners past, laughter having drowned out the tension below. He recalled those late nights when he'd patrolled the corridors of their huge house, ears cocked for any sound of disturbance, attempts to decipher every stray whisper, every sideways glance, every fleeting look of uncertainty. All recollection now felt overlaid with suspicion, as though the smiling surface had been concealing tempests he had never quite comprehended. The court order called for an answer, an appearance in court that would expose these intimate concerns to the world. He could well imagine the cameras, the press, the throng hoping for a look at the Brown family soap opera that they had waited years to see. The idea turned his stomach. He had grown up living in a life that was under constant scrutiny, but this was something else. This wasn't a matter of television ratings or a thumbs up from the audience. This was real. This was lawful. This was personal. And it could destroy the very fabric of his family. He could sense the tension mounting, not only in his chest, but his whole body. Cold sweat erupted across his forehead as he pictured going into the courtroom, strangers' gazes pressuring him, each one judging silently, analyzing, waiting for the next bombshell to drop. His brain attempted to prepare him for the worst, but nothing could convey the raw intensity of what awaited. Outside the window, the sun set low, painting long shadows across the living room. It seemed symbolic, as if the light of day was gradually being engulfed by the darkness of not knowing. Kody set the envelope on the coffee table, gazing at it as if the enemy he could somehow reason with. But he knew there was no bargaining. The road ahead was inevitable, and the truth, whatever it was, would sooner or later be revealed. He considered the children, their pure faces, and the life they had constructed around him. The prospect of putting them, even indirectly, through the emotional fallout of this courtroom fight tightened his chest even more. Family, loyalty, love, these were the things he had always struggled to guard. And now these same things were at risk. Kody breathed in deeply, attempting to calm the storm of feelings within him. Fear, anger, confusion, betrayal. But under it all, a small flame of determination still burned. He had overcome adversity before. He had endured storms that had appeared unconquerable. And now, however oppressive the burden of the trial ahead, he would face it, not only for himself, but for his family, for the truth, and for the thin hope that some things might endure even the worst testing. And as he finally placed the envelope upon the table, his gaze turned cold with purpose. The courtroom would lay bare secrets decades in the making, and Kody Brown was certain of one thing. He would not let the foundations of his family disintegrate without a fight. Every hissed rumor, every secret kept, every accusation that may arise, he would confront it all. Because ultimately the battle that really mattered was not about money, property, or reputation. It was about trust, loyalty, and the fate of a family who had always been about going against the grain. The summons sat on the table, a plain sheet of paper that could make it all change. And as the sun finally set fully, casting the room in deep shadow, Kody Brown realized one undeniable reality: nothing would ever be the same. The courthouse stood like a fortress, its gray stone facade gleaming in the late morning sunlight. Kody Brown got out of his vehicle, his hands slick with perspiration, even though the air was chilly. Each step in the direction of the door was heavier than the previous one. Reporters were already present, cameras shooting non-stop, microphones extended toward the waiting area. A feeling of dread swept over him. This wasn't a trial. This was a public accounting. A platform upon which all the hidden things, accusations, and unresolved conflicts would be set out before the world. Within, the air was stifling. The courtroom was filled with observers, defense and prosecution teams, and reporters all alive with expectancy. Air was charged with hushed rumor, shocked gasps of incredulity that hovered in every square inch. Kody's wives were seated apart from each other by a few rows, their own faces a complicated blend of rage, fear, and despair. Their gazes flashed toward him for a moment, each look holding its own silent accusation, its own query: how did it come to this? Kody's heart raced as he seated himself, the highly polished wooden bench beneath him feeling disconcertingly solid. The judge arrived, a symbol of power who came immediately to command quiet with the seriousness of a gavel. The case was called, and the tension in the room seemed to mount like a tide poised to engulf everything in its path. The charges were brutal: secreted assets, mismanagement of the family's resources, covertly conducted business. And perhaps worst of all, the implication that Kody had betrayed the very individuals who had trusted him most of all. The words rang in his head, louder than any judge's gavel: betrayal, secrecy, dishonesty. Each syllable cut to the quick, reminding him that the fight before him was not so much about money or possessions. It was about something far more fundamental: the trust and loyalty of those he loved. As the hearings opened, the witnesses were summoned individually, their words measured carefully but weighed with feeling. The courtroom was transformed into a war of words, a forum where the faintest glances, silences, and slight pronunciations had more power than any legal phrase. Kody sat and observed as his family's private universe was stripped away incrementally before outsiders. Each new piece a fissure in the well-maintained veneer of perfection that they'd developed over years. The first witness was a distant relative, someone who had quietly watched over the Browns for years. What they said was cautious, but the consequences were catastrophic. Accusations of secret bank accounts and clandestine activities were exposed, backed by records, emails and transactions that none outside of the inner circle had ever heard of. Gasps spread throughout the courtroom. Kody experienced a cold sinking sensation in his stomach. Each accusation was akin to a needle piercing at old sores, compelling him to face each doubt he had ever suppressed. Then one of Kody's wives testified. Her voice was strong but shook at the edges, bearing the burden of years of pent-up frustration and disillusionment. She shared secrets of choices made in secret, vows unfulfilled, and times when she had felt kept at arm's length in the same family to which she had given so much. The lens of the cameras brought every look, every flicker of feeling into enlarged perspective, so the courtroom was more like theater than judiciary. The air was charged with tension. Whispers swept through the observers. "Did you hear that? Can you believe it?" Even the judge's normally impassive face showed a flash of concern as the revelations emerged. Kody listened, rigid, his whole body tensed. He would have liked to reply, to answer the accusations, but the courtroom rules required calm and self-control. Instead, he could only take the blows, silently marking each disclosure on his mind, attempting to sift truth from deception. Then came the twist that none of them expected. Emails surfaced suggesting that some of the accusations might not be entirely genuine, that certain witnesses had been manipulated or misled, their testimonies influenced by personal grievances. The courtroom fell into a brief, tense silence. Kody realized that the conflict was not just internal, it had been fanned by outside forces, people who wanted to see the Browns fractured and publicly humiliated. Even in the midst of this, the emotional burden was almost too much to bear. Kody's children, sitting quietly with relatives, watched with bewildered faces. They were young enough not to properly understand the legal nuances, but old enough to feel the tension, the wrath, and the fear just below the surface. He ached to go to them, to make them know all would be well, but he knew words alone could not shield them from what was happening. It was a test not so much of deeds, but of bonds, of allegiance, and of the very nature of family. The reporter's pencil moved frantically, recording each utterance as the crowd watched each movement and gesture. Each new discovery seemed to spread outward, touching the entire room. Kody's head was reeling. Had he been overly trusting? Had he ignored warning signs that should have indicated something was amiss? The questions swirled without an immediate answer. Witnesses started to cross over in their testimonies, contradicting one another subtly but emphatically. Kody witnessed the alliances changing. The hostile stares passed behind hands and documents. Each new revelation seemed to add fuel to the fire, heightening the drama in the courtroom. For the general public, it was drama. For Kody, it was agonizing. A raw, unvarnished exposure of his family's weaknesses and frailties. In spite of tension, Kody sensed an odd sense of clarity breaking through. In the midst of turmoil, he saw that the courtroom, for all its haranguing, was compelling the family to face truth that had been displaced for too long. Secrets, deceptions, and suppressed hurts could no longer seethe in the shadows. Each allegation, each witness, each disclosed document was a harrowing step toward truth. And in that truth, however distasteful, lay the potential for resolution, if they made it through the storm. At the end of the first day, the courtroom was charged, everyone present knowing history was being written before their very eyes. The tension had not relaxed. It had just built to a breaking point, like a coiled spring ready to burst. Kody emerged from the courthouse drained, both mentally and emotionally. The world had witnessed the first half of the play. The subsequent chapters held the promise of even more revelations, more profound betrayals, and jaw-dropping turns that would touch every individual. As he drove home from the courtroom, city streets whizzing by outside his window, his mind was concentrated on one unshakable fact. The fight had just started. Back in the courtroom, trust, loyalty, and love would be tried as never before. And Kody Brown knew that when tomorrow dawned, the stakes would be higher, the tension more thick, and the secrets darker than anything the world had ever even imagined. The courtroom was a powder keg. The room was packed, every lens trained, every eye glued to the drama unfolding before them. Kody Brown sat at the defense table, his hands gripping the edge of the smooth wood until his knuckles whitened. His heart thudded like a drum, every beat resonating through his chest a warning. What was about to be done might change everything. The first witness was called. She was a woman Kody had trusted absolutely, a family friend who had worked intimately with him on matters of the home and money. The man's face was serene, too serene, as he started to tell of things Kody had believed were private, small choices made in the back rooms of their home, blown out of proportion now under the cold, critical eye of the courtroom. On more than one occasion, the witness said, there were inconsistencies in how money was managed, and no decisions were made with complete family awareness. It was always explained as being for the best interest of the family, but some felt blindsided. A hush fell over the room. Kody's stomach knotted. He knew the decisions being referenced, but the witness's tone suggested malice, insinuating deceit. Every word felt like a dagger, twisting deeper as evidence. Bank statements, emails, and transaction records was laid out meticulously. The courtroom gasped as the evidence was displayed on screens for all to see. Then came the wives' testimonies, one by one, each with their own load of hurt, resentment, and disappointment. The first wife testified in quiet, measured tones, but the pain that lay behind her words was unmistakable. I believed you, Kody, she replied, her tears glistening in her eyes. I took every promise, every word to heart, but I found things I wasn't supposed to find. Secret meetings, hidden accounts, decisions made behind my back. I don't know how to reconcile the man I married with the things I see now. Her words were like smoke, hanging heavy in the air, constricting and impossible to avoid. Kody felt the walls of the courtroom pushing inward. He ached to reply, to defend himself. But the court required calm. He swallowed hard, jaw clenched, allowing the words to wash over him and mentally compiling each detail, each charge. The second wife's testimony was even sharper. She testified to emotional manipulation, times when she felt consciously left out of family matters, and experiences that had left her wondering if Kody was loyal to her. Each word had greater impact on the case, painting a picture of subterfuge and distrust that promised to consume him whole. They leaned forward in their seats. Some of them whispered to each other, their response a mixture of horror, curiosity, and incredulity. Cameras recorded every flash of expression, every little twitch of feeling, and transmitted it live to an audience who hung on their every statement. The courtroom was alive, charged with tension and electric. Then there was the bombshell. Papers were laid before them. Emails, texts, and scribbled notes that implied that one of Kody's own had been tampering with impressions in the background. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. The charges were no longer merely about secret accounts or lack of communication. They now whispered of a cunning conspiracy to betray Kody, to turn family members against each other, and to portray him in the most negative light possible. Kody experienced a tangled reaction of anger, betrayal, and shock. It dawned on him with the force of a thunderclap. The struggle was not merely within. There were active forces endeavoring to disrupt the family, taking advantage of their weakness and spreading disorder. His trusted ally, previously believed faithful, could have been an accomplice. His most trusted friends in the household could have been deceived or manipulated. The network of falsehood was complex, and untangling it would be more difficult than he ever had conceived. Even as the evidence was piling up, the emotional weight became more crushing. The children, seated quietly with family members, were more and more conscious of the strain, their innocent faces shadowed by puzzlement. They could not comprehend the intricacies of the legal dispute, but they were able to sense the crack in the family, the sidelong looks of disillusion, and the naked pain that hung in the air like a heavy mist. Kody felt sorry for them. He wished that he could protect them from this kind of public exposure, but the harm had already been caused. The second witness changed the game. Here was an external party, one who had witnessed years of interactions, financial transactions, and personal family life. Her testimony was systematic, referencing details with meticulous care, dates, quantities, and messaging. Every disclosure hurt more. The crowd hung on her every word, while Kody's head spun as he struggled to match these public recollections against his own recollections. The strain grew worse, as there was one moment where a highly sensitive matter was brought up. Accusations of Kody having purposefully withheld information from family members in order to keep control. The air around him seemed to close in as people whispered and gasped. Kody experienced an icy deep fear in his heart. Could he hold up to the questioning? Could he fend off the accusations that attacked his integrity and character? Next was the moment that transformed the mood of the courtroom in shocking ways. A witness who had hitherto not spoken stood up, a figure who had been behind the scenes, watching things happen at arm's length. Their evidence contradicted earlier allegations outright, positing that much of the alleged deceit had been inflated, misrepresented, or even conjured up. The courtroom buzzed, tension giving way to incredulity. Evidence was presented revealing inconsistencies in earlier testimony, emails contradicting prior assertions, and notes that brought to light ulterior motives behind certain testimonies. The emotional pressure mounted, producing a roller coaster sensation that kept everyone's nerves on edge. Kody's relief was moderated by prudence. He remembered more clearly than anyone the courtroom's propensity to shift in a moment. A misstep, an ill-chosen word, and the delicate equilibrium of perception might come crashing down totally. Throughout the day, the testimonies came, each one showing layers of complexity, secrecy, and humanity. Some were heart-wrenching, revealing years of pain. Others stunned, revealing plots and schemes no one had imagined. Kody listened carefully, observing patterns, contradictions, and truths. He understood that the case wasn't merely what was spoken, it was what was said between the lines, the unspoken realities that would either free him or sentence him. At the end of the day, the courtroom was a pressure cooker of emotion. Each witness, each paper, each bombshell had prodded Kody to the limits of his patience. He sat down in his mind worn out, aware that the next day would be even more dramatic. There would be even more stunning revelations, and perhaps the most pivotal moment in the trial, the proof that could recast it all. Stepping through the courthouse doors, Kody sensed the weight of the pending war. The firecracker testimonies had rocked him, his family, and the public image of the Browns. But one thing was for sure. The courtroom had exposed cracks in the foundation of the family, secrets hidden and deceptions that could no longer be denied. Kody realized now that passing the trial would take more than legal acumen. It would take courage, emotional strength, and an unshakable commitment to learning everything there was to know about what had happened, no matter how hurtful. As he emerged into the evening light, he glanced back at the courthouse, walls etched into his mind now, as the site where his family's secret stories had started coming to light. The ride was just beginning, and Kody Brown knew that the second half, its twists, its surprises, the stunning confrontations, would shape not only the trial's result, but his family's own future. The courtroom was a drama stage. Kody Brown never thought he'd see. Flashing cameras, hovering microphones, and leaning witnesses awaited the expose that would shake up the Brown family to its very foundation. Kody sat at the defense table, white-knuckling the slick wood, his chest constricted with tension, every cell in his body on high alert. This was not a trial. This was a reckoning. The first to testify was a family confidant, who had long been in charge of family finances and decisions. His voice was steady, near clinical, as he explained discrepancies in the books and meetings conducted without complete family input. Kody felt his stomach twist in agony as papers, emails, and bank statements were held up as evidence. Each page stabbed his chest like a knife, every disclosure making him relive intimate moments publicly. Then one of Kody's wives was summoned. Her eyes were firm but brimming with unspoken anguish. She talked of secret accounts, choices taken without discussion, and times when she had felt helpless in the very household she loved. "I trusted you, Kody," she told him, her voice cracking. "I believed in your word, in our family's togetherness. But I see now that there were things I didn't understand, and I feel betrayed." The courtroom was quiet. Each sentence lingered in the air, weighed down by emotion. Kody ached to answer back, to defend himself, but the court demanded control. He gritted his teeth, bracing himself against the shocks in his mind. Each discovery was not merely about funds or choices. It was about trust, loyalty, and the ties that had bound the family together for generations. The testimony of the second wife struck even more forcefully. She described emotional blackmail, being shut out of decision-making, and years spent silently wondering about his fidelity. Her voice shook, but bore the intensity of undeniable fact. Every allegation raised the tension, sending a ripple effect through the courtroom. Whispers circulated among onlookers. "Can you believe this? This is worse than I imagined." And then the bombshell proof. Messages and emails that showed some witnesses might have been deceived or manipulated. The story began to change overnight. Kody understood now that this trial was not so much about clandestine behavior. It was about perception, manipulation, and the complex web of family relationships. Someone, or more likely someones, had manipulated events to make him look as bad as possible. The kids, sitting quietly in the background, watched with a combination of confusion and terror. While too young to grasp the full legalities, they could feel the tension, the anger, and the heartbreak emitting throughout the room. Kody's heart hurt for them, knowing the news would leave emotional wounds, but wishing he could shield them from the turmoil. The heat in the courtroom grew even more intense when an external witness, someone who had witnessed family interactions over the years, was brought in. Their precise testimony mapped out dates, occurrences, and communications that created a multidimensional picture of the Brown family dynamics. With every revelation, the charges were deepened, building a maze of truth and lies no one could easily decipher. And then came the turning point. A previously quiet witness took the stand, refuting previous allegations and showing evidence of exaggeration and manipulation. The courtroom erupted with whispers. Papers were brought forward that implied some allegations had been overstated, and others had been colored by personal agendas. Kody's glimmer of hope flickered in the midst of the confusion. Perhaps it wasn't all over. By day's end, the courtroom was emotionally spent. In each testimony, there had come forth layers of nuance, secrets, and human feeling. Kody left mentally spent, with a sense that tomorrow would reveal further shocking truths, and perhaps the trial's turning point, proof that could rewrite the narrative entirely. Outside, the courthouse was quieter, but the atmosphere of what had transpired still hung in the air. Kody understood the fight was far from finished. Trust was broken, secrets revealed, and relationships strained. The courtroom had exposed the extent of betrayal, yet the potential for truth finally being revealed. The session to come held surprises and revelations that could alter everything, for better or for worse. Just when it appeared the trial had peaked, the mood in the courtroom changed abruptly. Kody Brown sat stiff in his chair, fatigue pulling at his muscles, but his brain on high alert, feeling that something historic was imminent. The murmurs of the audience hushed as the bailiff called in a surprise witness. All attention focused on the doorway. The witness entered with a sheaf of papers that appeared to be unremarkable at first glance. But the tension was palpable, making it seem like it was a bomb waiting to explode. The courtroom sat forward, all knowing that this might turn everything around. Kody's heart pounded. His instincts told him this was not going to be some run-of-the-mill testimony. The witness approached the stand and began to speak, calmly but with an intensity that commanded attention. "Some of the evidence presented earlier," the witness said, holding up documents, "does not reflect the full truth. Certain statements were manipulated, and some witnesses were misled intentionally." A gasp rose as one from the room. The lawyers rushed to review the documents. The judge hesitated, fiddling with glasses, obviously taken aback by this unexpected disclosure. Kody's wives looked at each other in stunned shock. The charges that had appeared so incriminating a few hours before were now under scrutiny. The witness handed over emails, account records, and correspondence that uncovered a secret plan. Somebody close to Kody had supposedly masterminded spurious allegations, trying to frame him and set family members against each other. Each new evidence release was like a shock of electricity, electrifying the courtroom into nervous silence. Kody experienced both amazement and relief. He had suspected manipulation, but to see it so carefully set out was stunning. The energy within the courtroom changed from condemnation to curiosity, the crowd leaning forward, as though they were watching a real-life discovery of deception and clever strategy. Even the judge's attitude altered. The gavel that had been its symbol of authority and control now paled into insignificance, in the face of the tempest of truth that was unfolding. Kody's attorney worked swiftly, offering cross-references, validating timelines, and refuting previous testimonies. The entire chamber became a chessboard, where each move identified who had been speaking the truth and who had been trying to taint perception. The surprise wasn't over yet. Further evidence came to light, revealing that a few of the family members had unknowingly fallen prey to the trap, enraged and irritated by false information intended to mislead and disorient. Kody's wives, although shocked at first, were soon able to understand the larger context, realizing that some of their suspicions were not actually related to his actions, but were carefully staged lies on the part of another individual. Sentiments ran high. Gasps, tears, and muted sobs filled the courtroom. Kody fought to keep himself together as the depth of the manipulation was finally realized. The courtroom had become a mirror, and all the underlying conflicts and miscommunications that had silently stewed for years were visible now. He audience, viewing through live streams, could sense the tension on the other side of the screen. Social media blew up in speculation and commentary. #Brown Family Court #Kody Brown. Twist #Family Secrets. The trial had evolved from a tale of accusation and betrayal to one of revelation and suspense. Everyone knew that nothing on this side of the courtroom could be trusted. At the end of the day, Kody knew the truth. The trial revealed not only the cracks in his family, but the deceitful plans that had taken advantage of them. The manipulation, deception, and secret agendas were all brought out into the open, revealing the forces that had sought to bring down the Brown family from within. Stepping out of the courtroom, Kody experienced a nuanced blend of relief, sadness, and determination. The surprise had presented him with a second chance, not only to vindicate his name, but to mend relationships, address the root causes of deception, and repair the vulnerable trust that had been shattered. However, he was aware that the consequences would not be easy. Mending a wounded family torn apart by lies and dishonesty would require time, strength, and unshakable determination. As the sun went down outside and long shadows stretched across the steps of the courthouse, Kody glanced back for the final time. The trial had taught him that family, loyalty, and truth were not always what they seemed. But for the first time in years, he also glimpsed hope, a way to reclaim honesty, restore trust, and face down the darkness that had hung over his family for too long. The following session, he knew, would be the verdict. And with it, the ultimate ramifications of a trial that had uncovered the deepest Brown family secrets, leaving them permanently altered. The courtroom was quiet, the sort of quiet that weighed so heavily it could have crushed. Kody Brown sat at the defense table, fists gripping, heart pounding like a bass drum. Months of waiting, months of tension, all for this moment. The judge's gavel came down once, twice, and all eyes were directed to the bench. This was it. The judge's voice, steady but firm, rang out in the courtroom. Upon reading the evidence, testimonies, and the recently submitted papers, the court holds that Kody's gut plummeted. Each heartbeat felt like an eternity. The tension was agonizing. Cameras flashed wildly, recording the unbridled emotions chiseled on each face in the courtroom. That Kody Brown is acquitted of the most serious charges of dishonesty and financial wrongdoing. A shared gasp echoed throughout the courtroom. Some of the onlookers burst into hushed exhilaration, others into gaping silence. Kody experienced a relief wave sweep over him, obliterating some of the anxiety and fear that had held him captive for months. The verdict did not, however, eliminate the emotional wounds. Trust had been shattered, relationships had been tested, and the Brown family would never quite be the same. His wife's responses were a combination of grief, anger, and relief. One of their faces streamed tears as they whispered softly, "Finally, the truth." Another simply turned away, grappling with the layers of manipulation and betrayal that had become exposed. Kody understood that although the court fight had resulted in his victory, the real work of healing and rebuilding trust had yet to start. The courtroom cleared slowly, but the emotional baggage lingered. Kody left with a cautious sense of victory. The cameras trailed behind, flashing incessantly, but he hardly took them in. He went through every piece of testimony, every concealed email, and every manipulated charge in his head. The truth had won, but at a cost that couldn't be wiped clean. Outside, the sun was setting, and its golden light fell across the courthouse steps. It was a reminder, symbolic in its truth, that even when darkness comes, light prevails through it. Kody breathed deeply, looking at his family. Through the tension, the heartbreak, and the betrayal, they still stood together. They were battered and bruised, but unbroken. He knew now that the trial had been about something greater than money, secrecy, or public opinion. It had been about loyalty, integrity, and what bound them together. It had uncovered weaknesses, exposed hidden currents, and compelled them to face truths they had long shunned. But it had also provided them with a precious gift, the ability to remold from a basis of clarity and common sense. The children, still processing the day's events, gathered around him. Their innocence had been tested, but Kody felt a renewed determination to protect them, not from the outside world, but from the lingering effects of betrayal and mistrust. The future would require careful steps, open communication, and unwavering commitment to honesty. As he gazed out into the distance, Kody recognized that the battle was far from over. There would be relationships to repair, forgiveness to be granted, and trust to be slow-motion rebuilt. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope, a delicate but tremendous promise that the family might emerge through even the most brutal tests. He turned to his wives, offering a small but sincere gesture of reconciliation. "We've been through the worst," he said quietly, "but we're still here. That matters." Their eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement that while the courtroom had exposed the darkest corners of their family, it had also illuminated the strength they still possessed together. The media would guess, the public would argue. But in that instant, on the steps of the courthouse, Kody Brown knew something that no headline or camera could convey. The strength of his family, their ability to persevere, and the undeniable reality that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, love and fidelity could still hold on. The gavel could have fallen, the trial could have come to an end, but the road that lay ahead was only just beginning. And Kody, though battle-scarred and weary, was prepared to walk it head first, resolved to lead his family through the aftermath, to healing, to understanding, to a future where secrets could no longer tear them apart. The courthouse looming behind him seemed smaller today, less intimidating. What had stood as a symbol of fear and uncertainty was now a reminder of strength, of resilience, of survival, and of the truth finally revealed. Kody Brown stepped forward, into the waning light, prepared to rebuild, reconnect, and re-establish the trust and loyalty that was the heart of his family.